And Ian.
And Ian Thompson as well. So Richard and Ian, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'll kick off with a question. The paragraphs in the report that probably cause me greatest concern are those 5.12, 5.13, 5.14, and really is around the level of confidence that we've got in this section of the bridge, if it were to be loaned in this way, being returned to us in the state that it's currently in, intact and able to be reassembled in whatever way that we might decide with the community is appropriate for its final resting place in the future. Can we realistically ensure that that's the case by way of conditions in an agreement? And, you know, obviously there have been some conversations with Gap Filler. Is there the level of confidence that this item will be respected and be returned in its current state that would give the original community the confidence as well that it can be used as and reinstated as originally expected back out in the east?
That would be a condition of the loan, that it is returned in such a state that it can be reattached to the other sections of the bridge. And I haven't heard anything to say that's not achievable.
So 5.14, the small tidying job Gap Filler refers to in its proposal to deal with a health and safety issue, that's obviously some sort of intervention with this part of the bridge, some physical intervention with this part of the bridge. Is that something that would need to be put back to the way it is at the moment in order for the three sections to be joined together if that was what was desired?
I'm not sure exactly what is required, but any parts that, if there were to be any parts removed for health and safety reasons, we'd envisage that those be kept, so that assuming the bridge is to be reinstated, that those could be reutilised when that occurs.
All right, thank you. Sarah?
Just, I mean, I'm not an engineer or anything, but my first thoughts would be that if the bridge was to be reinstated sort of structurally for people to use, for example, or even as a structure that was sort of sitting in place twisted still, simply welding the bits back together wouldn't be enough structurally anyway. So work would have to be done to get the bridge sort of more structurally sound if it was going to be rejoined anyway. So a small section probably wouldn't make a difference, I wouldn't think, especially if it was being kept or, yeah.
I'm not an engineer.
No, I just...
But yeah. Look, I think my view is that we don't want to prejudge the outcome of the
That's
investigation. Right. So the reason for the resolution being reasonably open in its nature is that we don't know what the investigation will tell us, either from an engineering perspective or from a community engagement perspective. So once we've done the investigation, then we'll know what we can do, because there might be significant costs associated with this. I simply don't know, and that's the whole purpose of going through a process that will tell us the answers at the end. You know, what do the community want? What does the council want? How much will it cost? And what can feasibly be done?
Great, thank you. Are there any further questions? Yanni?
Yeah, I was just interested, I mean, again, like it's the first we've seen these new resolutions, but is there any way to bring forward that May 2018? I mean, it still seems quite far away, and is there anything we can do in the meantime to actually bring that forward? And obviously hearing the deputation this morning, the significance of the site, particularly for, you know, earthquake commemorations. So is there any way that we could look at doing something before February 22nd?
It wouldn't be my recommendation to bring it forward. I genuinely don't know how long this investigation will take. And I think there'd be some difficulty in putting an earlier time frame to that, because there may be some further engagement that we need to undertake with other members of the community. That in itself is time consuming. We will definitely need some engineering or technical advice to that. That might be time consuming or costly. So I think if we were to put an earlier date in, we would struggle to meet it. And at that stage, the resolution as it currently reads, what it says is that we will provide a report to the relevant committee by the end of May. So we don't know what the outcome of that or the recommendations of that report will be yet. But I'd be concerned about bringing it forward any earlier in terms of working out what we need to do and the achievability of that.
Right. And what I was a bit puzzled by the fifth one. Is that external funding for the golf course, or is that external funding for the transitional project? And what's the rationale behind that? In terms of, is it because we don't have money on budget, or is it because we think other people are likely to contribute?
We don't have money on budget. My understanding is it relates to proposed resolution 4, which is about the investigation, but there is another agency who may have funding available for us to give effect to resolution 4.
So should we not just specify who that agency is and request the funding?
Well, again, this has all come very late.
Yeah.
So if we were to specify who the agency was, there might be other opportunities who are lost. So when we agreed the motions this morning, it was agreed amongst the parties that it'd be best to keep it reasonably open. I think Evan does have an agency in mind, but I can't speak for him on that.
Okay. I mean, it's just hard for some of us councillors who know the history of this, who haven't had any involvement to date, and now we've got resolutions that's been put in front of us, and we've heard the concern from the community. But I just wonder whether we should be considering making some sort of budget commitment to this project today in light of what we've heard, so that we give some certainty that there is a commitment to do it.
No, I don't think you should do that today. I think the purpose of the additional resolution is to provide us with time to work through all those sort of issues, and it would be inappropriate for you to decide that now.
Did you miss out on the draft LTP? You missed out on the draft.
Well, there's nothing about considering this report today that prevents us raising something to be considered for inclusion in the draft LTP through that process rather than this process. So in order to include something in the draft LTP, we don't need to pass a resolution today.
Right, but if we don't have the information back until May, we don't have the information to inform what we would need to put in the draft.
Yep, I'd suggest we pick that point up as part of the development of the draft LTP.
Just a process question through you. It looks like the sequence up there continues after number 3, but it actually point 4 is the new motion, isn't it? So it's the new number 1.
When we come to a mover, and I've got one question from Dion, and then Sarah has indicated that she'd like to move this. So when we come to Sarah being the mover, I'll obviously be checking with her what it is she wants to move. So what we've got on the screen in front of us is a proposed resolution. Once we have a mover, then the mover will be moving whatever of that Sarah is wanting to
That
move.
proposed being number 4.
My understanding, and I'm sure somebody's going to tell me if I'm wrong, is that what we're expecting to be moved in terms of the discussions that have been happening recently would be 1 to 5, and then the additional motion bin 6, so that the original proposal goes ahead, but then there are further investigative works that happen, and then obviously there's further investigation now into other artefacts or items that may well be of the same importance to other communities or similar importance as this bridge has proven to be to the community that we've heard from today.
Okay.
Sarah, can I just check that that's what you were intending doing? All right, great, thank you. All right, so I'll take the final question from Dion, and then we'll come to moving this. So Dion.
Actually, no, that's fine.
I won't take the final question from Dion. That's great. So Sarah, you're happy to move, and what you're moving is resolutions 1 to 6. Great. Do I have a seconder for that? Dion. Now we'll move to debate. Is there any debate? Glenn.
Thank you. Every community has its, just need to find my notes where has its touchstones, large or small, and obviously this is one of them for the Avonside and Richmond communities, and we all know, being representatives of our communities, that they're never to be underestimated in terms of the significance and the meaning for those who live and have lived around them, and the experiences which they've gone through here in Canterbury, being the quakes of 2010 and 11. I think it's imperative we work with stakeholders and our leaders over there. They have continued to, they were a key voice and are a key voice at the time of the quakes, but they haven't stopped there. They've continued in their work, their vocational voluntary work in the community, and we need to listen to them. So in my view, it's imperative we do that. In that respect, I'm actually not happy with 1 to 3. I'm happy with 4 through to 6, but 1 to 3 along with 4 to 6 looks like we're trying to have a bet both ways, and I think 4 is a better approach. I would like the Christmas timeline put to one side, which I think is what 4 is saying, because I'd rather it was done well in its own time, and that we had ownership of whatever is going to go ahead by the community, by gap filler, by all concerned. I think we've got to do it well, and I really ask you to take this on board.
Okay, so I would point out that 1 to 6 is what's been moved. If you want me to put 1 to 3 separately, I'm happy to do that. Yep, I'll do that, no problem. Aaron.
Well, this is a really, really clear indication of post-quake how all of Christchurch isn't on the same page. Because when I first saw this proposal in that mini golf, and to know that it's going to have a heritage theme, that sounds fantastic. But what it forgot was that some of the items that were to appear in that, and some of the stories that were to be told, can really, really hurt some people. And those people hadn't been involved in the conversation. So the shot across the bow today, I think, is a timely one. I absolutely thank them for coming in and doing it, and it makes me feel a bit sick in my stomach right now to be voting on this. Knowing that bridge was cut into 3 ruins it anyway. It's still there, but it's in 3 pieces, so whatever happens with it in the future, it won't be what it was, because you're going to have to join it back together somehow. I wish that 4 was even written the other way round, that it was led by the community stakeholders and Regenerate Christchurch, just starting the and that was and it's the line I remember from Evan for years, goes back years back, and it was the ground up approach, starting with the knowledge of the community. That number 4 there, the words should be the other way round, which should start there, because it's their bridge. It's no longer ours. It's no longer we're and poorly the caretakers of it, because we've stuck it in a back paddock in the city to just deteriorate, and we shouldn't do that with something that some people held so dear. To other people on the other side of the city that never walked across it, it's just a twisted bridge on the other side of town. And a photo opportunity, it's something for rubberneckers to go have a look at, and that's all it was. But to a community that lived it and used it and jumped off it, I love that story. That's my childhood there, except we used the Heathcote, and that may account for some of my health issues. But that aside, I am a little concerned with this, and maybe the solution was an exact model of the whole bridge to fill that gap in the mini golf course, and I'm sure there's plenty of artisans that could make that out of metal and make it look pretty much exactly the same, and so you played across that rather than the bridge itself. So boy, I'm struggling with this one, and I'll be interested to hear the views of my fellow councillors, but I don't like it.
Thank you. Dion.
I'm happy with the 1 to 6 there, and firstly I'd just like to thank the community leaders from that area at the time who have come to us and actually told us the stories and a little bit more of the history, which I didn't even know about, which actually adds a little bit more sort of essence to this argument, or discussion I should say. 1 to 6 I think is what the community leaders who have come to us today have agreed on and are okay with, and it does set the framework for them to start working to ensure that the bridge does get the permanent sort of location that it needs in the east, and also sort of gives that the respect to the transitional use. I do want to caution though that the areas that may need to be chopped or something like that, I'd love to see some alternatives to actually, rather than chopping bits to sort of that safety bit, to actually maybe add some structure there to make it safe so that it can remain fully intact. But I suppose they're the engineers that need to do that. But yeah, I'm supportive of 1 to 6 on the advice and of the conversation that has had this morning from the community leaders who have come to us. They're happy with it. So from that perspective, I'd urge us to sort of go with this and actually just make sure it happens.
Okay, Anne, and then I'll come to Pauline and Phil.
Thank you. I'm supportive of 1 to 6, but I wonder if there's an opportunity here to put some sort of acknowledgement of the mistakes that were made in terms of this process by the organisation. And obviously nobody set about to create hurt or upset, but I think we need to acknowledge that that has happened, and the process perhaps wasn't as robust as it should have been. So, I mean, I'd like to apologise to Ryan, because I know that he has put a huge amount of effort and time into building communities. I'd also like to apologise to the residents for our lack of valuing of their history and their experience. So I don't know if we can do that, but I'd like in some way for us as an organisation to acknowledge that. I see that it's being addressed in the processes going forward, but I think there's also got to be some degree of acknowledgement of fault there somehow.
Thank you. Pauline.
Yes, just quickly, look, I support what Anne said. I think we could put a note at the bottom there that the council appreciates the process has been flawed and will endeavour to improve on it. And indeed it has, but I think we've come to a good solution here. And in some ways, it's a good thing that the bridge has been brought to light from being, as Aaron said, shoved into an old paddock and covered with who knows what. And it's brought it up to the surface now again. So, and it's a good solution that some of it is going to be reinstated as a memorial back in where it came from, and the rest of it will be loaned temporarily and will be given life at that site too. You know, there'll be children all around it and all sorts of things, and energy will then be transferred back to where it will rest. So I think we've got to look on the bright side of all this and go forward and understand that there has been agreement reached here. If there wasn't agreement, I wouldn't be supporting it, but we have. So I will.
Thank you. Phil.
Well, I'm concerned about 1 to 3, as some of my colleagues are too. I feel that it's kind of like a reluctant compromise in terms of the seriousness of the previous lack of acknowledgement of people, of the history and legacy of this, and the pain that happened at the time. And I just think in terms of that, it hasn't been a clear or good process, obviously, and I think that if in supporting 4 to 6, that in fact we can get it right, but I'm very reluctant and won't support 1 to 3.
Thank you. Yanni.
Yeah, I too want to apologise to Evan, Leanne and Tom, and also to, I know behind you there's also a number of people in communities as well who will be impacted on this, and I don't think this process has been good at all, and we do need to learn from it and maybe put in place some protocols to improve. I'm really concerned about 1 through 3 because it seems to me that how can you have a proper report around a transitional structure, which I think should be also considering a permanent structure, with just 2 parts of a bridge and 1 part already being used. It seems to me, that it would actually be good to look at this in its entirety rather than just a transitional project. So, yeah, I can't support 1 to 3 today. It's not to say that after that work's being done that comes back to us that, it may be that there's a different approach or the same approach is continued. But it seems to me that we really should spend the time talking to people. We've heard, deputations at very short notice to council today, raising, I think, concern. And so, yeah, I can't support 1 through 3. And I also think it is really important that we do make a commitment around the budget at some stage. So, hopefully as part of the draft LTP or within our existing budgets, I can't imagine that we don't have money that we could put towards this. So I think we should be given that undertaking at some stage in the near future.
Thank you, Vicky, and then Dave, and then Mike. Vicky.
I will support 1 to 3 and 4, 5 and 6. I think it's important that we actually tell these stories, and I think it's been interesting to hear the stories told today. But if the choice now is between this chunk of the Heritage Bridge sitting at Ferrymead, unkempt and unloved, and actually telling the story in a transitional way in a heritage mini golf course in the central city, where people will see it, know it, and understand some of the story of the city, then I'm definitely in favour of it being bringing it to life and bringing it into the city so that people can know about it. I think that's important for all parts of the city. And the 4, 5 and 6 deals with the local issue of what needs to happen longer term. So by voting against 1, 2 and 3, all we're doing in the meantime is condemning this chunk of a piece of heritage which has an interesting story to tell, which everybody wants to share actually, to sitting out at Ferrymead. That doesn't seem to me to be the most interesting, lively, sort of vibrant way of telling the heritage of the city at all. So I will definitely be supporting the fact that an agreement has been reached and that both parties can live with a solution that they've arrived at. I'm good with it.
Thank you. Look, I will support 1 to 6 also, and I agree entirely with Vicky. It's another surprise again. That the story behind the thing is being showcased in the city, and I do particularly also support the item 6 that there are so many things in our city that have been lost to us, and some that are being stored, and it is important, I think, that we establish a register and look after these things. I was particularly also quite interested in some of the stories that were being told around the bridge, and one of particular significance, that there was a weir underneath the bridge. And I've spent some considerable time working with people in the Styx catchment over catchment issues there, and the weir intrigues me, and I'd like to sort of learn a little bit more about why a weir was there and what significance it had to catchment management, because certainly last night we had some exceedingly excellent presentations on catchment management, and which I'd like to discuss more when we come to the Heathcote later on.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. I also will be supporting 1 to 6, and it does surprise me a little bit when I hear just a few councillors obviously concerned with 1 to 3, and obviously they talk about the process. We've actually listened to all the deputations, and a lot of work was done to get to this point, which is actually quite agreeable by a lot of people, and obviously communities have been affected through this bridge, emotionally and physically, but what has happened out of this process is actually progress. And we've been so slow over the last 6 years because of all the procedural motions and stuff we have to go through to actually create progress. So what we have done is actually created progress today quickly. And these resolutions ensure that actually the community that was affected when the bridge was obviously removed and want something back in place, which we all accept needs to happen, is actually going to have an outcome from this. If we had not had this come today, who knows what might have happened to that bridge. So I would urge all councillors actually to listen to the people that have spoken, and actually support all these items.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank everyone for all their work on this to now. I know that the process leading up to last week was not good, but I think that I guess especially the last 16 hours or so have been much more fruitful. It's really disappointing for both parties to be in this position today, and that the agencies have let you both down. So I'm really sorry for that. I can understand the concerns of Yarny Glen, Phil and Aaron over 1 to 3, but I'd also like to acknowledge that they've heard from both deputations today, and actually the residents from the area do support 1 to 3, and they're going to be able to have the chance to tell the story of the bridge in this new way. If we don't pass numbers 1 to 3 today, not only do a third party who have invested heavily in this have to go back to the drawing board through no fault of their own at all. It's been our processes that have let them down. But also the community surrounding that bridge don't get to tell their story to the wider community in a transitional way. And I think that's a really valuable thing to come out of this process. I'm really pleased that we're able to move forward with 4 to 6 as well, and that we will be able to start talking to the community about future uses, initially transitional. I'm really looking forward to a discussion in the community about a final use eventually, but I understand that's some time off. The mini golf, while the words mini golf might sound flippant, it's not. It's a respectful treatment. It's done professionally. It's designed to last for a while. And we've heard that there's been involvement from the agencies like Heritage New Zealand, and that's going to ensure that this is done well. I'd like to urge all councillors to vote for all of these today, and allow this touchstone, as Councillor Livingston called it earlier, to actually be in a place where the community can reconnect with it as conversations occur that allow a larger section to be used back in its community. Thank you.
The comments made in the report that this matter appearing on the public agenda was likely to generate some interest, and I think it's fair to say that that's exactly what has happened. And this has been probably longer than expected debate, but I think it's been a useful debate to have. The matters raised in the deputation, I think, are taken account of and respected in the amended resolution. I think it's important that they are. But the thing for me, and this is where I particularly value the addition of the final resolution number 6, this is a conversation on the face of it about a bridge and how that bridge should be respected and treated, and how a community that this bridge has importance to should also be respected and engaged with in order to get the best outcome, both short-term and long-term, for this particular bridge, or what really has become almost an artefact. But this isn't just a conversation about a bridge, it's a conversation about the effect that the earthquake had on communities and continues to have on communities. And it's a conversation about how there are certain symbols in the city, some of which are more obvious than others, of the effect that the earthquakes had on communities, and the value of those, what have now become artefacts of, as symbols of the earthquake and what physically happened, but also the effect that the earthquake had on communities. So I think this has been a good discussion to have, because I think it probably changes the way that we look at other examples that I'm sure we'll find as we go through the work that's detailed in item 6 of today's resolution, and that there are other artefacts, symbols, that also represent the earthquake, the physical strength of the earthquake, but also the effect on people, the effect on communities, and in some cases, communities that even though they're no longer physically there as they were, the connection, the strength of those connections and the mental connection with the land and the water and other physical features remains. And one of the messages coming through loud and clear from the deputation is that we need to acknowledge that, we need to respect that, and in future engagement, not only from council but from other agencies, we need to be absolutely taking that into account. And the Mayor's comments earlier, I think, make it clear that that particular point has been heard loud and clear. I will be supporting the whole resolution, 1 to 3 and 4 to 6, because I think it allows for the story to be told. Here we've got a bridge which has got a significance to a particular community, and I also think there's a story that can be told alongside that which has got value, and there's certainly value in that being told. And in terms of leaving something sitting in storage or finding a further transitional use for it before it's final resting place and appropriate permanent display or use is worked out, is entirely appropriate and is the most positive way we can look at this. So I'll put, first of all, motions 1 to 3. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No.
Do you want those recorded? Yep, so recording noes from Councillors Livingstone and Johansson, and an abstention from Phil Clearwater. And I'll now put resolutions 4 to 6. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. And just echoing again the thanks for the level of involvement and participation from the people that we've heard from this morning, and the willingness to work together to come to what has been a good solution. So thank you very much indeed to everybody involved.